Hello and welcome to Five Writers, 5 Minutes, a podcast which is chock-a-block with wisdom, writing wisdom from 5 Australian children's authors. I'm Leanne Tanner.
I'm Deborah Abella.
Oh, I'm Mick Elliott. I am here.
I'm Sarah Armstrong.
And I'm Zanny Louise.
And as you heard, our guest today is Mick Elliott, author and illustrator of the picture books, Dads and Dogs, Mums and Mogs. And he's got a couple of middle grade series, The Turners and Squidge Dibbly. Mick, it's terrific to have you here on the podcast today.
Thank you. I like to leave a dramatic pause before I talk.
So our topic today is writing humour. And I have a bit of a disclaimer for this because I write humour, but I am not entirely sure how I do it. So it kind of feels a bit weird to be offering wisdom on the subject. But there are a couple of things that I know. And the first one is that I don't set out to make people laugh. I have no idea what makes other people laugh. So what I set out to do is make myself laugh. And I figure that if I can make myself laugh, then there's probably at least one other person in the world who's going to find that funny. So I want to make myself laugh when I'm writing. I want to make myself laugh when I'm reading it back again. That's the first thing. The second thing is that for me, humour is very character-based. So I like to set up a character who has contradictions inside them, who expects something and gets something different. So for example, in A Clue for Clara, Clara's a little chook who wants to be a detective. And she thinks she knows all about what it is to be a detective and all about the human world and human detectives. But she's actually got all her information from a TV series or a couple of different TV series. So she keeps coming up against a real world that is really different from what she thinks it's going to be. And it's the same with Rita, the duck in Rita's Revenge. She thinks she is smart and fierce, and she's not particularly either one of those. So I like creating a character who has these contradictions inside them and then putting them in situations that make those contradictions worse, that really show up that difference between expectation and reality. Deb, your books have this really lovely, rather gentle humour. How do you approach it?
I love that you talked about character then, because I think my humour, does come from characters in situations, and some characters who feel very, very cocky and very sure about themselves, like my character Xavier Stone in Grimston. Like, he creates humour because he's a teaser and he kind of deliberately misreads a situation, like he steals someone's diary and says, oh, was I not supposed to do that? Like, he's got like a really cheeky sort of sarcastic bit of humour to him. But my Max Remy series had pure slapstick, pure getting sloshed by spaghetti, ending up in, at the end of a portal in a spaghetti-filled dumpster outside a restaurant. So, and I loved that because that's the kind of humor I grew up with. But I've also written a picture book that's coming out in February 2025 called No More Room in the Bed. And it sort of borrows from the rule of threes, but also it takes it even further. So it's about this boy who's, in the middle of a stormy night, and he goes to Dad's room and says, is there room for me? And Dad rolls over and the boy climbs inside. And then the storm gets worse and the dog comes to the door, and then Dad and the boy roll over and the dog climbs inside. And of course, this goes on to ridiculous proportions. And I can't wait to get that book and read it to kids till they see the next, because you're building up that expectation that, oh, okay, that was ridiculous, but what is coming next? So yeah, I'm like you. I am absolutely no expert in humor whatsoever, but we're humans. We like to laugh, and we know what makes us laugh. And so by nature of that, we write about humans. So there is inevitably going to be just kind of funny stuff in our books. But I'll tell you someone who is funny, Mick Elliott. How do you do it?
I am really, really passionate about humorous writing. And I think one of my huge bugbears is the fact that humorous writing and comedic writing, especially for boys, that there can be a little bit of snootiness and a little bit of looking down the nose towards it. You only need to look at the fact that, pretty much no comedy movie has ever won an Academy Award for Best Picture, even though those are the movies that we go to when we are feeling troubled, when we're having difficult times in our lives. What do? You put on something funny and brainless. But I would also say that in writing comedy, that you can do a lot with comedy thematically, you can actually explore some very, very powerful themes. And so I would say that while I always skew towards writing comedic situations, comedic stories, it's never just comedy for its own sake. There's a place for that. But I would say in all of my books, and particularly my first series, The Turners, which is, very, very high concept, but there's a lot of slapstick moments. There are actually some real themes in there which are not too deep if you need to find them. Like, you don't have to look too deep for them. So so I'd say that it is about the situation. Firstly, putting a character in a situation in which they are uncomfortable, and then seeing how far you can push it. There's also just the sound of language. I love exploring and playing with the sound of language and the sound of words and the way that characters speak. That can be really, really funny. And then I would say I can't wait to read your picture book, Deb, because it sounds like a masterclass in comedy. But the idea of building comedy as well, it's not just characters saying funny things, it's it being a funny situation, which then escalates and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I think that's the real skill. What about you, Sarah?
Well, I was joking earlier that I don't have a lot to say on this topic because I don't think my writing is entirely without humour, but it's not certainly something I set out to do. My whole focus is character and story. But what I do think about quite a lot is light and shade in my writing. And I think about tension and then relief. And, we need that when we're reading, don't we? Like if you exist in a story that's just constantly tense and it's just tense moment after tense moment, it's not as satisfying because you don't have that moment to relax into the relief and the satisfaction of relaxing into the relief. So I do think about light and shade, and the way I think about getting light, if shade is the sort of tension, if light, I think about writing beautiful descriptions, so describing things beautifully. I think about playfulness. I think about giving the reader that sense of safety and settling down. And I think about humour. The way I work with humour is it's often my character's thoughts or a little bit of dialogue between two people, like my character and the sidekick. They might have a bit of an exchange and just sort of take the piss out of each other a little bit. That feels kind of true to life for kids too, to me. Or it's the character having a bit of conversation with themselves about someone there. They can't say it out loud in this situation because maybe that would be dangerous or they need that person for something. But in their mind, they're thinking, all right, really? And having a little conversation. So that's sort of how I tackle it in dialogue, whether it's interior or external. So I guess that's what I'd say. And I mean, the great thing about writing too is that you've got time to come up with the funny lines in real life. I don't know about you guys, but I always think of the funny thing that I could have said in half an hour too late.
20 years too late sometimes. That thing I could have said in 2004 in that meeting.
Exactly. So, but when you're writing, of course, because it takes a while to write a book, you got all the time in the world to give your character those snappy lines, and I really like that.
Well, this is funny because this is one of my favorite topics, but I also have no idea what to say about it. As a consumer, I only watch comedy. Everything I watch has to be comedic in some way. Even my news has to be comedic. Same with my books. Like the books I read for pleasure are all funny in some. They're not like ha funny, but they've got humor in them. But I never set out to write funny myself. I think, like you guys have been saying, it is a lot about character and character-driven humor. So my funniest book, in inverted commas, would be Errol. So that's the book which kids really laugh at.
And adults.
Well, it's a mystery to me why it's so funny, but I think maybe something about it is the fact that it's kind of playing on the mum stereotype. And so, Errol's there with his mum and he's not listening to his mum, and you're meant to listen to your mum. And so just kind of taking something the way it's meant to be and throwing that out with the bathwater, I suppose. And like you guys are saying, exaggerating things. It's just about playing. So while I'm writing my manuscripts, I'm very much trying to just entertain myself, like Leon said, make myself laugh. And if I'm laughing, it doesn't really matter if anyone else laughs, because hopefully that joy has been imbued into the character, into the story. And you never know, maybe one person will laugh, and that would be awesome. So it's always a surprise when people do.
Can I say, one of the reasons I think Errol is funny is because it completely turns that situation upside down. So Mum says, Errol, come here. And Errol just doesn't.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go. I'll leave you. I'll go. And every kid knows that situation. But also they know that moment where you go, actually, I'm going to go because otherwise I'm going to get left behind. Errol not only stays behind, he has this brilliant adventure. And it's like, yeah, that's great. And then mum comes and rescues him. I think you turn that normal situation on its head. And that's how I think sometimes humor is made.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Deb, for explaining that to me, because it is a mystery to
reverse
me.
the power. It's a power reverse.
It's a power thing. That's right. And I know power dynamics
Yeah.
are used. And another thing that's
and
used a lot,
inverting situations.
inverting situations. And another thing that I intentionally do use is creating contrast between characters. So you can get that back and forth and that chemistry, like Sarah was saying, that, you know, where characters can vibe off each other, and you get that through the dialogue. But you need to, you know, either you get two characters who are remarkably similar, or maybe they're contrasting in some, you know, various ways. So exaggerating often helps you build humor. So that can be a good way to get started.
Thanks, Annie. Look, thanks, everybody. One of the things I absolutely love about this podcast is that I get to hear how everybody else does stuff. And there are always little revelations in it, which I really, really like. This is 5 Writers, 5 Minutes podcast and YouTube channel. Now go off and make yourself laugh. Bye-bye.
Good idea.
Bye.
Bye.